Hi, friends. Welcome to this very special session. We're talking about what a successful college application process is. And on this session, it's me, Ethan, and Harrison, who you'll meet in just a second. And just to give you the sort of what we're up to, we're going to walk through a student that, basically a process with the student that Harrison worked with. It's been a couple of years, I think. And we're going to talk about how the application evolved and unfolded. I think unfolded is probably even a better word. And hopefully share a lot of like interesting, juicy little tidbits along the way that you can use for your own process, or if you're a student, or if you're a parent or a counselor, something for your students. And we'll do a quick poll here, Rebecca. If we could just launch the poll, let us know, are you a student, parent, counselor, or other interested human? Let us know, because so then we know who we're talking to. I'm Ethan. I'm the college essay guy. I spend and have spent for the past 15 years, like, a lot of my waking hours working on and helping students with this particular process. For me, like the heart of it is helping students realize their potential because I feel deeply, deeply committed to that. And I think even if I wasn't the college essay guy, I would still be doing that in some way, shape, or form. Um, yeah, went to Northwestern, got a master's at UC Irvine, and now I'm here. Harrison, what about you? Maybe just give folks a little sense of who you are, and then we'll get in.
Yes, so I'm an essay coach. I've been doing this work since 2015. I love it for many of the same reasons that Ethan does, activating potential. I also just like getting to know students. I said this to Ethan yesterday. I get older every year, and you all stay the same age. And it's great to know kind of year by year what your generation is thinking about, what you want to write about, what you're looking forward to in life. And I went to UT Austin, and I live in Los Angeles. I've been here for the past 8 years, and I write for theater and television. That's what I do.
Yay. And I love talking with you, Harrison. Every time I've said this to you as recently as yesterday, like every time we connect, I enjoy it. I come away feeling like, I don't know, like there's a little more space inside me or something. What, let's just get in. What is a successful college application process?
A successful college application process for me as a coach involves, of course, hard work, but also a feeling of ease. I think that's so important. The anxiety, the pressure, the demands of everyday life, especially around this process and where that intersects with your senior year, can be a lot. So if in our sessions, if in my sessions with students, we can allow for a breath and we can allow for space to um, tune some of that stuff out, then I find the process works really well. My goal as a coach is to make the process feel less intense and less daunting. And a successful process to me looks like one where there isn't a moment of crisis or high anxiety, that we plan our work really well, that we're strategic, so that when November 1st rolls around, you are chilling. And I also, a successful process to me also means meeting the student's goals. So if a student wants to be done by October 15th, or if a student's goal is just to do their best without attachment to any particular outcome, whatever their goal is, I hope to help them meet that.
Yeah, yeah, I really feel that. And the thing that is particularly that I'm present to today is like, is this question, and I want to like launch it, students as you're listening and parents as you're listening, what is a successful process? And let's just remove outcome for just a second. So we can go like, success for me is getting into Northwestern, getting into UT Austin or whatever that is. Let's just remove that for a second. And I want you to like turn inwards and go, okay, separate from where I get in. And I think because oftentimes we can't really control that. We can do our best to raise the likelihood, but we can't control where we get in. What does a successful process look like if you had to measure it based on, let's say, after you've submitted applications, it's a week afterwards, what would determine success there?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I want to say for me, when I was applying to college, I did not have what you're talking about, the sense of ease. I waited to the last minute. I didn't really know what was going on. Now we're kind of preaching to the choir here because if folks are joining us for our webinar in August, like they're ahead of the game, which is great.
Yes.
But I
absolutely.
want to invite y'all to think about this. Like, what would a successful process look like for you a week or 2 weeks after you've submitted, before you know where you're getting in? Because my hope would be for, I'll just speak to students a second, for you all, is that you would feel like you did your best. Like you left it all out on the court. You were able to take all the different sides of your brain and heart and just, manifest them in beautiful ways in the application. And then you have a sense of like, you know what? It's in their hands. Because
Hmm.
that would be a successful application process. If I felt like, well, I would say if I was going through the process again, I felt like, you know what? I did everything that I could. Um, and the rest is, we'll see. I think part of that, in like a practical sense too, is like spending some good time and energy doing something that people don't often come to College Essay Guy for. I mean, usually they think of like write your essays, but is like developing that college list in a way where you have schools that you know you can get into. Because I've seen, in terms of sense of ease, when students have that sense of like, there are schools that I know that I'm going to get into or have a good chance of getting into, and I really like them. The energy or the tension just goes. Have
Yeah.
you? Yeah, I see you nodding, so I'm guessing you've seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I wanted to add on to something that you said. Um, 1 or 2 weeks out from all applications submitted, yes. Do you feel like you did your best? Another marker of success for me is, do you feel that the essay sounds like you? Is this an essay that only Ethan could have written?
right.
Um, that's really important too, because I am very sensitive to students feeling and remaining excited about their topic, from beginning to end. And I
Mhm.
know sometimes when you're in like the thick of draft 5 or 6, you can start to not feel that way. But when all is said and done, were you happy with your topic, and do you feel like it represented you well? That's a big question for me. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump right into Emily's application because, as we were kind of going back and forth and trying to find examples of a successful application to review for this call today, this one to me struck me as successful in a few different ways. And there's sort of like, and I'll just share my screen a second. There's sort of like there's success in the sense of like the student ended up at the school that, one of the schools that she wanted to. But there's also some stuff that happened along the way in working together that you've told me about that I'd love for you to share, and some things, some ways that the student was oriented. And I want to probably say that a few times today is like, how do you orient yourself in this process to really give yourself a process, and not just sort of like something that you're rushing.
Mm.
So just by way of maybe, getting to know this student before we get into the personal statement, if you just let's just all together scan this with the eyes of the admission officer. And even though Harrison's going to have a little more information than we will, I want to just kind of invite you all to imagine that you're an admission officer reading this, and you're deciding to look at the activities list first. And you're seeing, okay, this student has some volleyball experience, a lot of volleyball experience. Look at that, 25 hours a week, a bunch, lots of competition. So this is a volleyball player. Also, 10 hours a week playing the flute. So we've got that side of things. Also rehearses a bunch. So there's that, like, has been doing sports and, an instrument for a while. And then notice there's some leadership stuff in here. Head of business relations for a nonprofit organization, has been involved in DECA, helping, with the marketing management, entrepreneurship stuff. Also had some, some work experience here. You notice there's some like Math Honor Society, more volleyball, but in a different way. You'll see some English Honor Society, and then even, involved in French, taking some French. So I'm seeing here, if I'm just scanning this as an admission officer, like a wide variety of, the students doing, got their hands on a lot of different things. Now, if you're looking at this and you're a student, you're feeling intimidated, look, this doesn't have to be your application, but this is one application. And, take from it what you can. We're going to be like, pointing out specific things along the way. In fact, I'll show you one specific thing along the way. One of the things as I look at this description for the activities list is, first of all, the first verb here is something that demonstrates leadership. So co-run is really, really nice. It shows like, oh, this person's really involved in leadership. And there are some really nice active verbs here: encourage, review, manage, and they show just a different range of responsibilities that the student's been involved with. So that's sort of like a practical pro tip on the side, something that you can do as you're thinking about your own activities list. Harrison, just in terms of getting to know the student a little bit before we get into the personal statement, what would you add about, of context just as about this student here?
So a little context for this student. One thing I mentioned to you yesterday is outside of this activities list, which is nicely well-rounded, she has tons of interests, tons of interests. She's a big reader. She's outdoorsy. She has a lot going on in her life. And not every interest or activity that one does can or even should make it on the activities list. But this is a student who, right off the bat, when we were talking, in our first conversation, I thought, okay, there are 4 or 5 potential essays just in this conversation alone. She was really enthusiastic about sharing what she was into, and we'll talk a bit more about this as we get deeper into this conversation. But also someone who really crushed the brainstorming and the pre-work part of the process, which just really, a phrase I like to use, stocked our pantry with material right off the bat. So that's something I would throw in for context. I will also add, this is a student who, in her initial self-assessment, Emily said that she likes writing. Writing is something that she enjoys. I know that's not the case for everyone, but in this particular application process, she was coming in with some excitement around getting her thoughts on the page. One other thing that I discovered when I was going back through some of our emails and through some of the brainstorming that she did, she mentioned that she had this habit that was ingrained in her in school of writing for the satisfaction of a grader. And she came in with the goal of ditching that habit, of writing for the appeasement of some invisible audience member who, it would be evaluating her, with a grade, with a number. So her goal in this process, which she shared with me, was to, even though people will be reading these essays who, will be making decisions about you, to write something that she felt was a reflection of her and not a reflection of what she thought someone else wanted to see.
I love that. That's so, let me just stop sharing for a second, because I think that's so important. The thinking about just why you're writing, because there's a particular orientation. I think if you're writing, as you're saying, to like gain someone's approval, there's a slightly different vibe if you are doing it in a particular way that's like, hey, I'm writing a piece that really exemplifies who I am. And I'm also taking into account what are some of the qualities that college admission officers are looking for, which we'll get into as we get into the personal statement a little bit here. Let's do it. Let's jump into it. Do you want to read it or do you want me to? What's your preference? Like,
Um, I love the way you read essays, so I'd like to hear you read
okay.
it. You
Okay,
great
cool.
expressive voice.
Okay, cool. And then I might pause where you can kind of weigh in here. All right, here's the essay. This is Emily's personal statement. Let's play two truths and a lie. I'll go first. I can put both of my feet behind my head. My favorite color is blue. I have perfect pitch. If you guessed the lie was perfect pitch, you wouldn't be the first. People never believe that perfect pitch exists until I show them. I usually have someone download the piano app on their phone, press notes on the keyboard, and quiz me to identify notes and chords. The crowd eats it up every time. When I hear a note, I just know what it is. It seems abstract, but I can see the notes in my head. C's are red, plump, abrasive, whereas G's are green and inferior to C's. B flats are teal, F's are total snobs. Notes have distinct personalities. I can feel the C-ness of the C. This has perks. In band practice, I'm able to identify that our dissonance is a result of poor tuning, not incorrect rhythms or wrong notes. We can easily correct our cacophony, saving our ears from torture. With perfect pitch comes the ability to detect almost any audible noise. Now, let me pause for a second. I just want to name a thing that I really like is I'm pretty clear that the theme is, because it's been repeated a few times, and I'm just going to search for the word here, pitch. Perfect pitch comes up a number of times. And just for those of you who are looking at home, if you're writing about something with a theme, it's not a bad idea to repeat it a few times, especially if you're taking what we'll call like a more creative take here. So I'm just noting it's very clear to me what the topic of this essay is, perfect pitch. And as a college admission reader, I'm going, I'm hoping at some point the essay will branch off and talk about perfect pitch in a broader way. So let's take a look and see if it does that. I hear things others probably don't want me to hear, and honestly, things I don't want to hear. I hear the murmurs from boys in the hallways laughing at my height. I'm 6'2". I hear self-destructive defiance from my sister, who, for the seventh time this week, refuses to eat. I hear the cries of heartache from my mom, who spends nights on end trying to keep my sister alive. I can't unhear these things, but I can take cues from them. I can hold my head up high in the hallways. I can support my sister by simply being her best friend, no matter how much it hurts to see her lose herself. Okay, I want to just pause for a second and I want to hear either from the external, Harrison, or from the internal, because you know how this process went. Like, what's happening here in this paragraph as it shifts from this like literal perfect pitch to like this other perfect pitch? Like, what are you seeing? What are you noticing? Give us your X-ray analysis.
So right, so it starts with the obvious, and this is the thing that's on her activities list, right? Music. That's the expected first step. And one of the things that we worked on, Emily and I, in the process of writing this essay, was nudging toward the sort of you'll see this as we get through the rest of the essay, but nudging toward more and more uncommon things. When we talk about listening, what are the maybe the unexpected turns that we can take? So what I notice is that she puts in a challenge without writing a narrative-based challenge essay, and she shows that there's not necessarily a tidy solution to this challenge, but that she uses this skill of listening to just be with her sister, to support her, based on the things that she's hearing that she doesn't want to hear. So I'm getting values from this: compassion, family, love, which were some of the top values that she identified in her pre-work. So I think this is a really surprising and intelligent turn, and an essay that's otherwise pretty playful.
Mhm.
It buries some pathos in the essay without overdoing it, without making struggle the focus of the whole piece. So I think she's done a nice little vulnerable moment that we don't linger in for too long.
I love that you're saying this. And I for students who are like who have a big challenge that you've faced, I want to just take note that like it doesn't have to dominate your personal statement. If you find some larger topic that's going to allow you to talk about different sides of yourself, you can bring in that challenge in a paragraph like this. And you notice, I mean, it's kind of a subtle, but it's a really interesting shift here where it's talking about perfect pitch, but it's segueing here to like, I hear things others probably don't want me to hear, and honestly, things I don't want to hear. So it's now taking a larger theme of like listening and hearing, and that suddenly opens up the theme so that it doesn't have to be about literally notes that the person hears. It's like it's about listening in some broader way. And notice that that Emily doesn't go into like a ton of detail necessarily about what is it that her sister's struggling with. It's just like, hey, it's tough. It's tough at home. But
Mhm.
like you said, Harrison, there's like such empathy here. And great, let's keep going. Perhaps my true gift is hearing the notes under notes. Ooh, this is great. So this is now, notice this is a little transition where we're still using hearing, but now there's this thing that raises a question in our minds. Well, what does this mean, the notes under notes? And I love it when a sentence at the beginning of a paragraph, kind of like when I'm reading a blog and it's got a little bolded sentence and I'm like, oh, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more. People often express unconscious sensitivities in the timbre of their voices, in their inflections, their cadences. In school volleyball, we scout players before games, all-star hitters and agile liberos. My teammates have a tendency to attack them, criticizing their form and targeting their character with glee. Their voices straddle the line between contempt and insecurity, evident in their enunciation and upspeak at the end of their criticisms. Stress is commonly masked by impatience, hurt, obscured by indifference. Knowing there's often a note under the note makes it easier to take things less personally and be more empathetic. Truth is perceptible in tone and resonance, in modulation of pitch. This trait's helped me get pretty good at two truths and a lie. Cool. I mean, it's really cool. So the notes under the notes. So here's the example, and I just want to like say that there's like something that's so intriguing here. And in terms of volleyball, which is like such a common topic, common sport, as you alluded to, Harrison, there's just this like, there's something that I've never read in a volleyball essay. And it starts with the notes that we hear, the attack, the criticizing, the targeting their character. So this is like the note on the surface, But then we see, because Emily's empathetic, there's something else underneath it, right? There's impatience or it's hurt or something else right underneath that. And it shows that empathy in like a really big, deep way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, go.
Another thing I really like about this paragraph is she's still using the language of music, right?
Yeah.
Timbre, inflection, cadence, resonance, modulation of pitch, right? So to me, that's just a really nice stroke of craft.
Yeah.
Because we started with the music example. We are talking about pitch, which is a musical term, and those words I think become recontextualized here. We're not talking about what she's hearing in band practice. We're talking about what she's hearing in the voices of other people. Something
Yeah.
else I really like about this essay is, she could leave it here. Their voices straddle the line between contempt and insecurity, but she goes one step further and tells us why,
And she,
tells us why she hears that. So it's the old cliche show don't tell, but she's really doing that quite nicely here.
yeah, the note that I'm making is like the specifics of what she's hearing shows us she's really a listener,
Yes.
in at least two ways, the like I can hear, but also I can really hear, like I can hear what's not being said.
Mhm.
Great. As someone who hears almost everything, my favorite sound is actually nothing. Surprise! Another turn. I just got goosebumps. Laughter, cheering, weeping, singing, the constant noise can be draining. Silence has its own frequency, one I've come to seek, to find contentment in stillness, to understand the value of rest. I'm going to highlight these values: introspection. That's an achievement equal to spotting an F sharp out in the wild. Lovely. Productivity is not synonymous with progress. Love that. This is a nice insight. You know, I don't need to be part of every club, be everyone's friend. It's great to shoot for the moon, but it'd be pointless if I didn't stop to look at the stars. I found joy in staring at red lights from my car window, listening to nothing more than the hum of the engine. Savoring the sound of silence has made all the difference in my life. If a C is red and a G is green, silence is, in fact, golden. So good. This is something that, students take note. Ask yourself, if you've got a theme that you're working on, what's the opposite of the theme? Is there a sort of counter melody, as it were, to whatever you're laying down? And so for those of you, especially those of you students who have incredible profiles and been doing all the things, what does it look like when you just rest? For those of you who have achieved, when have been the moments of, like, I don't know, difficult learning where you show that vulnerability, where you show, yeah, I messed up this one time, but I learned from it? Yeah. What else are you noticing here? And I think most people are wondering too, is like, how did the student arrive at this counterpoint? What was that conversation like? And then we'll read the end.
Right. So it's exactly what you said. It's that thinking of the opposite of the thing you're writing about. So we start with the most obvious. We pivot to the personal when she writes about her sister. We go
Hmm.
to the secret superpower, which is actually, I can hear the note under the note. And then the total left turn, the big left turn at the end, which is silence, which is the thing that no one is expecting.
Yeah.
So, we talk about uncommon connections all the time. That is like the uncommon connection of this essay, in my opinion. One does not associate listening with silence very often, I would say. So, what the process, we made a list of all the things that Emily hears, whether that's a broad category like things I don't want to hear, very specific, bad tuning in band. We made a list and kind of stacked that list up to some of the essay brainstorming and some of the values and some of what Emily had shared with me, about feeling sometimes really burnt out in school,
Mhm.
learning to take a step back, to say no to things that she simply does not have time to do. And when she spoke about that, I heard a lot of emotional intelligence. I heard a lot of wisdom that she had earned through her experience. And to me, I thought, well, let's get that in your essay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I was so struck by it and so moved by it that I thought, we have to fit that into your application somewhere somehow, because it demonstrates, again, I talked about ease at the beginning. Well, this is clearly a very accomplished person who has a lot of rare talents and a pretty unique profile in some ways. This is also a normal teenager who
Right.
wants to find time to rest, right? She's of course going to be an amazing asset on your campus. But part of the reason why she will be is because she has a healthy sense of proportion.
Right.
And I thought it was important to make that pivot. And I think it paid off in a really spectacular way in this
I agree.
essay.
I agree so much. Like this is 144 words, so it's about a fourth to a fifth of the essay, but it's offering that counterpoint. And again, for those of you students who are listening, I don't want you to feel like, especially if you've achieved some things, like put that in your activities list. That's why we did this first. Like put all of that awesome stuff in here so that you don't feel like you have to be like, and by the way, I, was part of this junior national blah blah blah. Or by the way, I also play the flute. I mean, isn't it, yeah, it's just awesome that so much of this stuff, she's letting it speak in the activities list. And then this feels personal, it feels vulnerable, it's fun, she's really it sings, it really sings. The thing that you were talking about, Harrison, reminds me of the pile of stuff exercise that we
Mm.
sometimes talk about. And this is just a simple exercise that involves just going, like you said, what is all the stuff that I could say about my theme, my topic? And then they talked about it and probably talked about it some more. And then eventually you pick a few of these. And I'm assuming, I don't know, Harrison, but I'm guessing that there were some other paragraphs or some other things that she thought about writing about but couldn't write about. So there were more than just three or four. It was probably choosing a few of these many things. So like let's say, I'm just guessing, but I don't know how many she had on her list, but oftentimes it's like 7, 10, maybe more things that
Mhm.
they could say about it. How take us in a second and like maybe either specific with Emily or generally, how do students know which scenes to pick in their essay? Yeah, that's such a hard thing. What advice on that?
It's such a hard thing. In this case, it was truly instances of both of us lighting up at the same time, and just what felt the most resonant, what she had the most to say about. That's a big one. What you feel like you could write a whole paragraph about. If you have a possible idea, but you don't think you can get more mileage out of it than maybe a sentence or two, chances are that's not the thing to write about.
Right.
So these were things that she felt she had a lot to say about. That also that she felt that she could write um, visually. Like I think this paragraph, there are some great visuals here, right? Staring out the car window, the color of the notes. Any time that we can lean into writing that feels cinematic or highly visual,
Yeah.
I think it's always a real asset to an essay. So there was that, and then also the old kind of standby formula, and I don't mean formula like in a way that's rigid, but one great way to look at what you're writing is, am I showing values,
Mhm.
more than one even?
Mhm.
Do I have concrete experiences or examples to back up what I'm saying? And can I connect that value and that experience to some insight that I've had, something I've learned about process, about myself, about leadership, about whatever it is you're writing about? So value, experience, insight. If you have all three of those things in an idea, chances are it's at least viable.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to put these in the chat for people who are like, he's taking notes, but he's not going to share the doc. Don't worry. The ones that I would add to what you've shared here. So let me just review these real quick. What could you write a whole paragraph about? What really lights you up? Like what feels like it'd be fun to write about? Is it something that's maybe uncommon? Like maybe not everybody else is going to be writing about this, in particular, like the value of silence and nothing in your life. Like what does nothing look like? What are those specifics that are concrete and, if possible, visual? Staring at the red lights from the car window, listening to nothing more than the hum of the engine. And then one that you didn't mention, but I know that we think about a lot is what isn't already elsewhere in the application. There's
Right.
nowhere else in the application that you're going to be talking about finding joy in staring at red lights from your car window. That's just not going to quite fit in your activities list or the additional info, which we'll talk about in just a second. Let's look at the ending here. Listen, oh, let me actually before I think there was one more. Oh yeah, can you connect it to an insight? And that's just going to take people like, how do you come up with good insights? You just need to keep thinking about what do I want to say about this until you come up with something where you kind of surprise yourself. You're thinking about it and you're like, oh, that feels like fresh. I like to think of this sometimes as like, it's not like a reheated something that you put in the microwave and you're like, here's something I say all the time. It's like, what is this thing that you're like in the process of discovering about yourself? Because when those come to the surface, you can really feel it.
Mhm.
All right, last paragraph. Listening requires vulnerability and humility, a willingness to hear not only joy and laughter, but pain and suffering, raw emotion and hidden desires. I'll always keep my ears open to the wonders of the world and the beauty that's found when we all stop and listen. Truth, I have perfect pitch. Lie, it makes life easy. Truth, I wouldn't have it any other way. Just a lovely ending there. Um, I want to talk about additional info section in just a minute, but will you just give us the high level sort of like in terms of what made this a successful personal statement process for Emily? Like, what are some of the things you mentioned already that she really dove into the pre-work? But what I'm using this term again, orientation. How do you feel like Emily was oriented in this process that allowed her to come up with a successful essay?
Well, I think oriented toward she was oriented toward sharing things about herself that, as you mentioned earlier, there weren't other places in the application for. I really want them to know this about me, and part of that goes back to an exercise that we have, which is 10 things I want schools to know about me. So these values that don't necessarily appear on the activities list, she was really invested in those coming across. She had a strong sense of who she is,
Yeah.
um, and that was a real asset. I didn't have a super strong sense of who I was at 17 years old, so I was like, props, girl. But yeah, I think she was oriented not toward perfection, but toward growth and toward vulnerability. And by growth, I mean she wanted to get to a place where she was proud of this essay, and wanted to engage with process in a real way. She started, by the way, on August 21st, 2022. So 2 years ago to the day. So,
Mhm.
I know this is a really great, really polished essay, but, she didn't need to start working on this in June to get it to this place.
Yeah.
What she had in her sort of fundamental orientation was a desire to, level this up and not call it a day at draft three.
Yeah.
So she had specific goals about what needed to be in this essay. And then much of the work that we did was about cutting and eliminating what was extraneous. Her writing ability, I would say, is she came in as a pretty developed writer, but still, we went through all that craft work of eliminating what we didn't need. At first, she relied a little bit on quotations and aphorisms, and Spider-Man once said, "With great power comes great responsibility." So kind of getting those. There's this great writer, Verlin Klinkenborg, who wrote a book called Several Short Sentences About Writing. And he has this term, volunteer sentences. These are the ideas that leap to the fore before you've really stopped to think, right? It's the cliche, it's the aphorism, it's the thing that you've heard, it's the quotation that you think you should start the essay with. So she was really willing to take a look at where she was doing that.
Yeah.
That's a concept that I introduced to all of my students, because I think it's applicable just across the board. And you see it in professional writing, you see it in journalism, you see that kind of writing everywhere. So also getting to a place where she felt she was saying things as only Emily could, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I love that. Two questions came in, and we can do like quick rapid fire. How many drafts and which prompt did the student choose? Did Emily choose?
She chose the open prompt, the open
Topic of
content.
your choice?
Yes, topic of your choice, which is always a great thing to do. How many drafts? This is about, so there were like five pretty major drafts, and then drafts after that involved smaller but vital tweaks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we clocked in ultimately around like 9 iterations of this essay.
Great.
versions of this essay.
Yeah.
Um, and I see this question: when you say drafts, do you mean rewrite the entire essay several times or just tweaking? Yes. So I mean both. I mean, of course, if you're doing a final polish and cutting an adverb here and there, I don't know that that's a draft, but any iteration of the essay that contained significant differences, and I some tweaks are significant. I'm gonna call that a draft. Also, I see questions asking about the name of the book I mentioned. It's called Several Short Sentences About Writing. It's a great book. Um, one last thing that I want to talk about in this
Yeah.
essay,
Please.
uh, two truths and a lie. A couple people have asked about that. So this to me is like the grace note of the essay, and this fell into place pretty late in the process. We both felt that the essay needed like some other little thing, some way to like speak directly to the reader, involve the reader, and have just kind of a nice formal, playful bookend, because Emily is very playful. And she likes games, and she said a couple times in her essay brainstorming that perfect pitch is a party trick. And I thought, okay, well, let's do something with that. So we came up with two truths and a lie, just as a fun framing device. And again, a way to speak directly to the reader. So I'm always looking for a conversational aspect of a personal statement. I always like to have a student imagine that they're speaking to someone specific, a friend, a family member, someone they can identify. And I think that opened the door for this kind of loose, informal way to start the essay.
Yeah. Let's because more questions are coming in, let's make sure
Yeah.
we get the rest. Additional information section is just your opportunity to share other stuff that you want to either expand on or stuff you want to maybe explain, like grades or something. And there were some additional pursuits here that she obviously wanted to highlight: her independent Mandarin studies, a research project that she was involved with, some research about mental health in relation to the fashion industry. My guess from this, Harrison, is that this is just stuff that just didn't quite fit into the activities list. She was like, hey, waving arms. I want to let y'all know that I was involved in this. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what would you add? Anything else that you'd add about this?
Yeah, I mean, I love this as a way to use additional info, because some of what she's talking about, there wasn't a faculty supervisor. This wasn't a formal, independent study organized through her school. She has, like I said at the beginning, this is a person with a lot of interests, and interests don't always translate to activities list. And of course, these are things that she has done. I mean, with the Taiwanese Association, that was through an org, right? But we just thought, you have all these other parts of you, and they sound like intellectual curiosity, which is big in an application. So let's just say a little bit about them without pressure to turn them into an essay.
Yeah. I want to make sure we've got time to talk about the supplements. So we debated which supplements to talk about, but we decided to go with the ones that were the school that she ended up. So she ended up at Penn at the Wharton School, which is a business school. And one of the prompts is a sort of unconventional one, meaning that there aren't a ton of schools that ask about this. Write a short thank you note to someone you've not yet thanked and would like to acknowledge. So I'm going to read it through kind of quickly so that we'll have time to talk about all three supplements. And Harrison will give the analysis and the behind the scenes. Hey, twin, or I guess hi, mom. People like to tell us how similar we look and act, and I hope that they're right. I want to be just like you. I remember the neon sticky notes you left on my chocolate milk every first day of school. They made all the difference when I felt lonely in the cafeteria. The little things make the biggest difference. In middle school, I had a huge crush on a boy. In an attempt to be a player, he asked both me and another classmate out to McDonald's. I told you, and you immediately exclaimed that I deserved better. You didn't even know who he was. You raised my standards and taught me to respect myself. When I needed to perform my solo at band UIL, compete for HOSA, and start in my volleyball tournament, you drove me around Texas, flew me to Philly, supporting me the entire way. You've helped me realize that to willingly serve is to love. Mommy, you lead by example, showing me the kind of love I can only hope to give others. You've inspired me to be a strong woman, a servant to others. Thank you. Thoughts? Yeah,
It's
give it,
it's just
yeah, go.
it's just a lovely essay. It's just a lovely note. She's doing exactly what the prompt is asking her to do. She knew she wanted to write about her mom. And I want to say about this essay, you might think you need to go far outside the box, but go with what's true. Who are you most grateful to? Who has had the biggest impact on your life? It makes sense if that person is a parent or a sibling or a best friend, and that's totally fine. Um, for this prompt, she knew she wanted to write about her mom. I just had her make a list of memories based on prompts like, when did you feel closest with your mom? When has she made you feel most loved? When has she made you laugh? What object reminds you of her? And most importantly, like, what have you learned from her example? How do you want to be like her? So just a few leading questions, which ended up looking like a bulleted list. We chose the ones that felt most salient because this is a limited word count, 200. And then peak example, because the prompt is literally asking for it, of addressing an essay, addressing a piece of writing to someone specific. So I think you really feel the bond that she has with her mom. The love is very operative. It's just it's a lovely note.
Yeah, it's one of your, I think this is one of your gifts, one of your superpowers. Harrison is asking questions. I see it when we talk, and I see it, when on the Google Doc notes. But yeah, and to the counselors, we're like preaching to the choir here. But I just want to encourage you, students, as you're thinking through this process, like, and this is kind of like a weird thing you have to do, but to like step out and go like, okay, if I was encouraging someone to write about X topic, what questions would I ask them? So you can kind of like be counselor coach for yourself in this regard. But yeah, so beautiful. And it turns into this lovely montage. Again, it's visual. We've got
Mhm.
insights. We've got things that aren't going to show up elsewhere in the application. So it's doing all the things. How will you explore the community at Penn? Consider how Penn will shape your perspective and identity, and how your identity and perspective will help shape Penn. I've noticed a trend in Why Us essays moving more towards this style, where it's more about what will you bring to the college community, because I think colleges are tired of students saying, you guys have such an awesome blank program. And it's like, we know, what are you going to bring? So you'll see that this is a really common prompt, and I think really well executed. Take a look. Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Kate Moss said this in the 2000s, but my sister said it just a few years ago. When diagnosed with anorexia, she was willing to lose her life to achieve quote unquote perfection. Gone were our braiding trains. Most of her hair was clumped on the shower floor. Upon talking with volleyball teammates and church peers, I discovered the widespread impact of the fashion industry's messaging. My fashion ambitions stem not only from a desire to innovate, but from a place of hope. Everyone deserves to feel beautiful. I plan to volunteer at Be Body Positive Penn to spread eating disorder awareness to student athletes. I'll also join the Fashion Collective to utilize Penn's fashion magazine, The Walk, as a platform for industry representation. The Taiwanese Society would promote cultural enrichment, Penn Flutes would serve as my creative outlet, and Wharton Women would show me the power of femininity in action. The underlying commonality among these diverse extracurriculars is a desire to foster beauty in my communities. Woo! That's good. To use my experiences to help everyone feel great in their own skin. My sister, people all over the world, they forget how beautiful they really are. Tear emoji, but also actual tears. Harrison, thoughts?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite essays that Emily wrote. And by the way, was definitely a super essay. We used versions of this for a UT prompt, a Cornell prompt, a Columbia prompt. That we're all kind of similar but different. So this essay is really good, I think, because it's loaded with information about both Emily and Penn, and yet it's vulnerable, it's sincere, and it also contains just the standard hallmarks of an effective identity and community essay. I want to say, like, supplementals like this, they don't have to be all business.
Right.
What I love about this is how she ties a specific value to each avenue for exploring community at Penn, right?
Mhm.
Representation, cultural enrichment, creativity, and then she ties them all together with that broader aspiration to foster beauty and self-love. So I knew this about Emily, that promoting beauty is important to her. This is something that we talked about, and we sort of led with that value. Now, as far as the Kate Moss and sister intro, And also this intro, you know, the harmful impact of fashion industry's messaging. So this is 86 words out of 200. Might seem bold, but I think it tees up what the sort of meat and potatoes of the essay really, really well. It gives us much needed context for what she's about to say, so she doesn't have to elaborate too much about any one of these things.
Right.
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm pretty proud of this one.
Yeah, I'm stoked on it too. And it's and again, students, I want you to see that like almost half the essay is about her, which, as you're saying, is kind of bold. Know that like in these essays, it's not all about Penn. Look at the first, it's you. How will you explore community at Penn?
Yeah.
So they really want to know about you first. And everybody's, every student, there's not like a perfect balance. Some students are going to do a little more on the school, some students are going to do a little more on themselves. I think, half and half here. It's actually a little more than half that, is Penn focused. But then notice within these paragraphs, she's still connecting it back to the values, the things she's going to get out of it. I'm repeating what Harrison said, but you can see that all in this paragraph here. Um, Lovely. Let's look at the last one. Considering the specific undergraduate school you've selected, how do you intend to explore your academic and intellectual interest? Now, notice how this is different from this one. How will you explore community at Penn? So oftentimes this is going to be more about extracurriculars, community. This is very Penn specific, but read the prompt carefully. Academic and intellectual interests at Penn. As a little girl, I loved to play Barbie dress-up games on the computer, eventually elevating my interest to the world of commerce. I downloaded Poshmark to sell old clothing, finding joy in product merchandising. Enthralled with investing my creative energy into profitable endeavors, I became a sales associate at Brandy Melville, my favorite clothing store. Tasked with brainstorming color schemes and playing mannequin dress up, I became the store's visuals leader and discovered my fascination with fashion's creative and financial nuances. Fashion, business, liberal arts, what connects these entities? At Wharton, and here this is again, it's like a Y major. So this is like Y major, right? Connected to the student. And then boom, Wharton. I'll investigate the intersection between economic modernization and classical theory. This is just so specific, and nobody else is going to be writing this, y'all. Like, love through foundational classes like corporate finance. Now, this is the meat and potatoes. You got to have specifics in your YS, while
Mhm.
exploring how business can remedy societal flaws in social entrepreneurship. Notice the Y in between here, y'all. Through a minor in Asian American studies, I'll connect with my Taiwanese roots and take classes to analyze ethnic market boundaries and the American dream's meritocracy. If you can sound like a grad student, please do. Through Wharton's social impact research experience, I'll research alongside Professor Zhang, an expert in Chinese pricing strategies. I aspire to gain more than financial knowledge. Beauty lifts the spirit, making the world a better place. As I build my fashion empire, I yearn to explore the connecting thread between the fabrics of cultural diversity and entrepreneurship. Love. Yeah. Notes, thoughts?
Yeah, again, this was a framework that we used for a few different schools, a few different Y majors, and an essay for Harvard about an extracurricular. So got a lot of mileage out of this one. So like the community essay, it is fashion oriented. But she's coming at it from a different perspective. There is this whole first paragraph is what we call demonstrated interest. So one way I love to approach a Y major essay is if you know what you want to study, what experiences have you had that have prepared you for the next 4 years of study? And here, I mean, notice how we have Poshmark equals product merchandising. Brandy Melville equals creativity and also financial nuances, right? So she tees up her preparedness for the field, and then we go right into hard information, pen specific information. There's real interplay between the creative and the financial.
Yeah.
And I think the really smart thing that she did, because this is creative, fashion, this is financial, but then there's this third piece, liberal arts. This is the product of 8 pages of research that this student did about Penn and shared with me. She really
Amazing.
looked into the interdisciplinary elements of the curriculum and chose to highlight that in this essay. Which I thought was a really, really smart strategy, because notice how she mentions the American dream's meritocracy. That's very liberal artsy to me. So she fits all three of these angles into this essay. And then she closes with this lovely statement about the way that beauty lifts the spirit. This calling for her is not just vocational, it gets to the core of what matters to her and her values. So values absolutely have a place in a Y major essay.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here. I don't have much to add. This is such a beautiful YS. I'm like no notes. It's just great. So let's zoom back for a second, and we're going to shift to Q&A here in a couple minutes. But as you can see, and I'll just kind of do the synthesis, this is a student who was pretty, who had a range of interests, a diverse array of things that they were involved with. But some of the most quote unquote impressive things aren't the things that we're focused on in the personal statement. Instead, she's found a theme that's allowing her to talk about lots of different sides of herself. She's bringing vulnerability. She's showing her superpowers and skills. And here she's showing her ability to think critically about even her own topic and show sides of herself that don't involve her just like crushing it academically or extracurricularly all the time. She's clearly put in a lot of work in it. And then she's using the additional info section to be like, oh, by the way, here's some other stuff, rather than sort of awkwardly trying to cram in all of the other research project and sort of name drop these things. It doesn't feel very name droppy, or meaning like activity droppy, because the student, number one, is focused on values in the in the um in the personal statement, and also trusting that the activities list and the additional info are going to do the work for her.
Mm.
Um, for the supplemental essays, you've got a nice range. Again, the personal, the fun for the thank you note. Then you've got something that's a little bit, again, back to the personal here, but really doing enough research to see that there are a range of extracurriculars you're going to be involved in. And then doing enough research to be able to go, hey, I can give you want to know why I want to go to Penn? I'll give you 8 pages of why I want to go to Penn. Like that's more than I ask students to do, or that we ask students to do, but it does show the length that the student was able to go to really be able to articulate that fit, and then eventually trim to get it down into these word limits.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Any closing thoughts, Harrison, before we shift to Q&A here in a couple minutes?
No. I think you summed it up rather well. This student was a pleasure to work with, and yes, and to reiterate, did end up going to Penn, to Wharton.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just before we get to Q&A, I want to share that and I sometimes forget to say this on calls and stuff, but we do, in case you're curious, we do work with students one-on-one. If that's something that you're interested in, we'll put a link in the chat, and you can learn more about what that process is like. Broadly speaking, this is for students who are still, whether you're still struggling to find your topic and you're like, you need someone to bounce ideas off of, or you're hoping to have like someone who can kind of be like a project manager, to kind of be like, what should I be doing when, and what's the timeline and stuff. We help with all that. And if you're like worried about budget and you're like, I can't afford this, we have an awesome program called Matchlighters, where we work, with for a chunk of hours, 10 hours, helping you through the essay and applications. We've got an incredible volunteer team. I imagine some of them are on this call right now, who are standing by ready to work with you. So if that is an issue for you, check out our Matchlighters program. You can just find it by College Essay Guy Matchlighters. Yeah, we'd love to connect and potentially work with you. And now's a great time. Now the more that you can get done during the summer, the better. I'll say that. Okay. I hope that's given y'all enough time to think of questions. So let's take a look at the Q&A. And maybe what we can do, Harrison, is let's both look at the Q&A and choose questions that we think maybe a number of folks might be wondering about.
Yeah.
So let's pause for a second so both of us can read and other folks can add in. And I'll let you, well, whichever one of us has one that we think is a good one, we'll just take turns picking one.
I'm seeing a couple questions related to why major. If you don't exactly know, if you haven't decided, and two, if you don't feel that you have a lot of experience related to the major that you want to pursue. So that's totally fine. That's absolutely fine. Um, what's important is showing us why you want to do it, why you want to study that, what questions light you up, what is it about that field that connects to some values of yours, if not to actual experiences that you have had, or is there a value that connects to, say, business, that does relate to another experience that you've had? Is there an uncommon connection you can make between, say, coaching little league and business, right? So it doesn't have to be I started a business. It doesn't have to be I worked at, a financial consulting firm over the summer. It can be through the lens of a value. Any experience that has a value in common with the major that you're interested in is a potential path for you. The other question, that was about experience. The other question about, oh, I just lost it. These are coming in fast. If you haven't decided on a major, that's okay too. You can talk about areas of possible interest. If you might be interested in psychology, and you also might be interested in business, and you also might be interested in literature, that's okay. What do those things have in common? How do those fields speak to your values? So that's what I would recommend if you find yourself in either of those positions.
Yeah, I love that. Somebody's parents asking questions. One is like, what if your kid hates writing? I think that a good thing to think about is like it could be that they hate writing until they find a topic that they're excited about writing about. And I want to share in the chat, there's a link to a YouTube video that's got a good brainstorming exercise. And this is linked to some others of you asking about like, how do I find a good topic? Check out that video because that's got basically a 30-minute walkthrough of some of our favorite brainstorming exercises. And I think that once you find an awesome topic, it can be galvanizing and really energizing and helps to sort of create a little rocket booster of energy. Someone's asking, is it too late to start on the essays? No, is it too late to get help? Not at all. This is, most of the essays, the early ones aren't due until November, most of them. And then the regular decisions aren't until January. So there's still plenty of time. Some of the things you can Google, like cutting your personal statement. If you just search cutting personal statement college essay guy, you'll find it. Recommendation letters. If you search recommendation letters college essay guy, we've got a whole guide on that. Let's see. What's another one that do we work with grad students or law school students in their essays? Yes. Grad student college essay guy, just type it in and you'll find that page. For the activities, some of you are asking, I'm sorry, I'm doing rapid fire. Activities, like broadly speaking, just list your most important activities at the top and the lesser important ones down below. And don't worry too much about, should this be fourth or fifth? It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. How do you, go ahead.
Please, you go. No, you go. I've been going, you go.
How do you know whether the changes you are making are creating a better essay? That's a really good question, I think. So from a craft standpoint, is the writing getting clearer? I think good writing is clear writing. Are you finding ways to say what you want to say in the most direct and legible way possible? Two, you can do a little audit of every paragraph. What values am I seeing? Am I linking those to specific experiences or examples from my life? And is there an insight? Is there a nugget of wisdom? Is there something that I've learned that I can demonstrate? I think if you look through the lens of those three elements, you can see whether you're getting closer to an essay that has those things or further away from it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and that answers the question that someone else asked, but I want to just point out that Harrison just answered it. The person says, I understand this child is exceptionally bright. What about an essay for a more modest yet normal high schooler with A's and B's who's not going to the Ivy League? Everything that we're saying, I think, applies in terms of the tips. So on the activities list, active verbs. In the personal statement, finding a topic that's hopefully somewhat uncommon, writing about it with paragraphs that show values with specific examples and then insights. Like if you just go with those two bits of advice, the application is going to up level. But it's kind of like if you hand a basketball to an Olympic athlete, they're going to do different things with it than if you hand it to someone who's never handled a basketball before. And so I'm not saying that the student was an Olympic athlete. Certainly the student did more with it, but we're still using the same tools and principles. It's not like, in other words, we're giving some advice to certain students and some advice to other students. We're still basically giving the same advice. It's just sort of like what comes back and the level of work that a student is willing to put in. Because a lot of times So someone also asked, I'm jumping around a bit, but someone also asked how many drafts does an essay take? A lot of the drafts that you'll see on the College Essay Guide website are the product of like 5 or more drafts. Sometimes in, more extreme cases, 10 or more drafts,
Mhm.
because the student is like really willing to work hard, but didn't actually consider themselves a natural writer because they didn't have a lot of experience with that. So I think part of this, and the reason I feel okay being like, it's okay to write 5 or 10 drafts, is that I think that you're learning a whole lot about yourself through the process and you're learning a lot about writing. And I think those are really valuable things beyond just the college process. So this is a long-winded way of saying, anonymous attendee, that I think that these things that we're giving are still the same advice that we would give no matter what, how bright, quote unquote, the student is. You have one?
Um, should you share your personal statement with parents or teachers? If so, when? And should you allow them to make edits or only advice and commentary? So I think the best time to share your work is when you're outlining still, when you're in the earlier stages of deciding on content. If you do want to share, and if you trust that the person you're sharing with will have um, feedback that has the best interests of the essay and you in mind. Um, should you allow them to make edits or only advice commentary? Well, I would be careful about handing editing privileges to someone else. The work should be yours. So I would stick to just soliciting advice. But in the course of receiving advice and commentary, you have every right to not accept someone's notes. Take what is useful to you and leave the rest.
Yeah, how about that? There's somebody was asking about mental health challenges. Should you write about those? There's a whole long, like I just did a very thorough, I'll still call it thorough blog post on that, but I'll put in the chat right now. It's called, mental health disclosures in the college application process, and it's linked to a 3-part podcast that we're just wrapping up. One from the counselor perspective, who's a mental health professional, one from the college perspective, and one from the student perspective on how to navigate mental health disclosures. The short version of it is that if you can put in the additional information section, great, that works super well. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the entire personal statement, and you'll see some specific examples of that. Um, Somebody else asked about, international students. What do I do if I'm an international student and I'm applying from, this student I think is applying from Ghana. If you're an international student, you're watching this and you haven't checked out our hub of free resources for international students in particular, I want to just put it here, highlight it for you. I'll put it in the chat as well. It's got so much stuff. And I would say bookmark that and read. I would start at the top and read through those. It's going to take a little bit of time, but there's so much, including, some of the top 10 mistakes that students who are applying from overseas make when applying to school in the US. Well, I know we're over time, but we've got a couple. Let's do another question, maybe or two each, and then we'll call it for today. Um,
Absolutely.
Someone's asking, I'm not clear about how much consulting costs. Reach out to us, the folks on our team will reach back out to you. We just need to know a little bit more about you. Should I include resonating quotes in my writing? You don't need to. You can leave
No.
those out, Trey.
Yeah, I would advise against it. We want to read your words.
Yeah.
Um, great. Let's see. How often do you meet, talk with students, and for how long? Um, so I guess this is from a student, but for coaches out there too, we meet as often as the student needs in order to complete the work that we assign them between sessions. So maybe that's once a week. If a student can really get it done, maybe that's twice a week. And for how long? Meetings on average might run 60 minutes. As you get later into the process, you might be meeting for 20 minutes to talk about a 150-word supplemental. It just depends.
Yeah. Someone asked, are single topic cohesive stories better for personal statements than a montage essay? I don't think so. I love a well-written montage, just like the one you've seen. It feels cohesive to me because it has a clear central theme.
Mhm.
So I have to actually, I realized I just looked at the time. I was like, oh, I need to take my daughter to soccer practice. Like she's going to be a couple minutes late. So even though I'm like super excited to stay with y'all, I got to keep a commitment to her. So we have to call it for today, but we'll be back real soon with more webinars and resources. And Harrison, it's such a pleasure. I'm so excited to have you back to do another one of these sometime soon.
Yes, I'm looking
for the
forward to it. Thank you for having me today. This was wonderful.
I appreciate you. All right. Bye, friends. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.